difference, we make it clear.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Space Power podcast. I'm your host, Bill Wolf, the CEO and founder of the Space Force Association. And I'm so honored today to have with me a president of one of the many companies under BRPH, Lieutenant General retired Dave Buck. General Buck, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us here at SFA.
Hey, Hip, it's my pleasure to be here. I just got done with lunch, so I hope I don't have any like food in my teeth, but you'll let me know, right?
I will let you know, and if you can, edit it out for sure.
There you go.
Sir, I always love getting on a conversation with you and recording the conversation because it's always a good time. It's always fun. I remember working for you back in the day, and I think a lot of folks have that sentiment working for you. They just enjoyed working for you because it was a good time. So, by way of background, just talk a little bit about how important that is to have a good time, regardless of how important the mission is.
Yeah, you surround yourself with good people and the work is really easy. Just just to refresh some people on the call here, because not everyone's going to know who the heck I am, right? I'm almost a has-been at this point, Hip, but I'm really a nuke guy. I grew up in the nuclear field, ICBMs operator. Then when I was a major, I transitioned over to space and got a little bit of cyber on me too. So, yeah, I'm kind of a nuclear guy, a space guy, and a little bit of cyber guy. Wound up my career, a long career, out of Vandenberg, dual hatted as 14th Air Force Commander. And then my joint hat was Joint Functional Component Command for Space. So, I was responsible for the organized training and equip mission through 14th Air Force, which we no longer have numbered air forces in the Space Force, and then protecting and defending the space domain under my joint hat. And boy, did we have a good team, right? I really do believe you can have fun and get the job done at the same time. The problem is, people often mistake nice for being easy, and that's not the case, right? Yeah, sometimes you have to draw the line, but yeah, we certainly had a good crew.
Absolutely, sir. The last time we got on a call like this and recorded our discussion was back in April of 2020, if you can believe that.
Wow. Time flies, huh?
Time is flying, and then what it allows us to do really is reflect on all the activity that's been accomplished in the last 5 years. But really what I want to ask you is what drew you to BRPH? There's so many things you could have done with after you retired from the Air Force with your background, and you obviously went to BRPH. Tell me a little bit about that story.
That's an interesting evolution. Uh, like many of us, when I retired, I started a consulting company and business was good. So I started a second consulting company. So I had two consulting companies running. One of my clients at the time was BRPH, and they hired me. Back then, BRPH was working what was referred to as the Ground-Based Strategic Deterrent Program, and now it's called the Sentinel Program. It's the Minuteman Replacement Program for one of the ground-based leg of the triad. So they hired me on as a consultant for GBSD, now Sentinel. About a year into that, the CEO, Brian Curtin, came to me and he said, "Hey, how'd you like to join the company as a full-time employee?" And I'm thinking to myself, Hip, I'm not an architect or an engineer, right? I fly satellites for a living. And, what can I do to help a very is well established company like BRPH, 62-year-old company from an architect, engineering, and construction perspective? I really didn't know revenue, profit and loss. I didn't know utilization rates, multipliers. I didn't know any of that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's all about leadership. It's about surrounding yourself with the right people, giving them left and right margins and achieving a goal. That doesn't change whether you're in the military or whether you're in the civilian community. But BRPH, we're an employee-owned company, and that's attractive to me. We're not publicly traded. I got to know the culture of BRPH, and I really, really like the culture here. And I got an opportunity to lead and mentor a group of people again toward a common goal, supporting an industry that I'm very passionate about, and that's the aerospace industry.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I had the opportunity, I was riding my bike at Vandenberg gosh, I think it was last year, middle of last year, and rode by one of your launch sites. And so
Oh,
you're known
wait.
way out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, sir. So BRPH is known for its cutting edge work in spaceport and aerospace facility design. How do you see infrastructure playing a key role in enabling space power for the United States and our allies?
Yeah. Um, I'm going to get this wrong, but I'm going to be close, I think. It was either President Roosevelt or Eisenhower who said, amateurs discuss tactics and professionals or warfighters talk logistics. And it's the same, I don't care what domain you're talking about, that mantra holds true. You know, it's beans, bullets, bandages, first in, last out. Logistics wins fights. Logistics sustains everything. And really, that's what we're talking about when we talk about infrastructure for space. It's a logistics tale. And I don't care whether you're terrestrial based or whether you're talking on orbit logistics, on orbit servicing, mobility, logistics, all that stuff. It's all about logistics and supporting the fight. And that's why logistics is important. And that's what BRPH does is we build facilities.
Yeah, you talk about logistics there. And not a lot of people talk about the impact space logistics is going to have on future warfare. And so when you start talking about trends and the
Yep.
criticality of innovation, what trends or innovation in spaceport development are you most excited about right now?
As I look at where our spaceports are located, land is a finite resource, especially on the coasts. So what we're seeing, believe it or not, is almost a rebirth into people getting excited about offshore or marine sea-based launch and recovery. I think that's a real thing now. They're going to start investing in offshore launch and recovery just because we don't have enough infrastructure on our coast until, and I tell you a quick story. I know we only have a finite amount of time. Speaking of finite resources, when I was a lieutenant colonel, squadron commander down at the Cape, I worked for Wing Commander Brigadier General Don Pettit. I don't know if you remember Don Pettit. Yeah, a long time ago. This was 2010, 2011. No, 2001, 2002. And Don Pettit used to say, I want to turn these spaceports and these launch facilities, this spaceport into something that resembles an airport. Launch and landing are routine. He was a real visionary. I didn't get it at the time, but now we are implementing Don Pettit's vision from 25 years ago. A real visionary, right? So I think that reusable launch vehicles, that's obviously key. Private public partnerships, HIP. I'm seeing that a lot now. I'm seeing the government saying, hey, we don't want to build and operate. We want commercial to come in, build and operate, and we'll give you work. We're seeing a lot of that kind of stuff. We're really starting to look at spaceports as an entire ecosystem. That's old words overused, but
Mhm.
so much more than space launch complexes now. You've got commodities, you've got payload processing facilities, you've got everything right there because logistics, and I keep going back to logistics, logistics matter. And those are the kind of things we're seeing right now. Um, I think what's going to really happen is with this acquisition reform and these new contract, other transactional authorities, the commercial solutions opening that they did for the payload processing facilities, those kind of things where maybe, and I know OTAs aren't really contracting vehicles, but they're like legal documents where a commercial company can come in and maybe do some research and development or something. And then the CSO, they just, have provided seed money for payload processing facilities on both coasts. So those kind of innovative contracting that's going to make us more efficient and effective, I think.
Yeah, thank you. We went over a lot of topics there. You just described a
Sorry,
lot of.
I was just puking words there.
No, sir, it's all good because all of those issues need to be brought up. And when you talk about where BRPH is and realizing that we've got a traffic jam happening on the east and west ranges.
Yep.
And so the next question is, what are we doing about inland spaceports and
Yeah.
inland space launch? Back to your analogy about spaceports as airports. And back in the day, back in the 40s, everyone was afraid of aircraft because it wasn't a known thing, and they were afraid of a bomber crashing on a town. And we still talk about that today whenever we're talking about where Air Force bases are. What is the safety that's going to be around the Air Force Base? So is it time now to start talking about spaceports in the same way where we say, yeah, it is dangerous and we're willing to accept that risk if we build in the right places?
I think the key is exactly that. If we build in the right places, and there are places we could do that, I'm thinking Mojave, I'm thinking Oklahoma, right?
Hmm.
Um, we just aren't mature enough as a country to be comfortable with it right now, and it breaks my heart. You know, our critical infrastructure truly lacks mission needs, right? Where are we lacking? What's the long pole in the tent, Hip? For me, as I look out over where we're building and what we're doing now, we don't nearly have enough payload processing facilities.
Right.
We need more payload processing facilities. We need more commodities. We need more skiffs, right?
Hmm.
Um, and we need more, launch pads, of course.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the solutions is to start normalizing space lift. I think we're a ways from doing that. I think horizontal for sure from the in landlocked areas, but I don't think we're going to see vertical for a while. That's why I think this offshore thing may actually get some traction.
Yep, that makes sense. And so what that does is probably leads to a logistics concern, challenges. It leads to engineering challenges. So what are some of the biggest challenges BRPH is facing right now, and how are you solving them?
So our biggest challenge, I would say, as we're building these, or designing and building these facilities, the commercial providers, the Space Force, they need these facilities now. Well, if it's a new facility on a greenfield site, in other words, a site that hasn't been previously disturbed, just getting the environmental assessment done, making sure there's nothing there that we're going to disturb. We're not disturbing the turtles, the snowy plovers, pick a species. That can take a year to 18 months just to get that environmental assessment done, which really slows it down. It really slows us. Uh, we want to get going. The customer, the client wants to get going too. And I get the environmental thing is really important, but that slows us down. So what do? We have to get to the left of that as far as we possibly can. Safety concerns, Hip. And primarily with safety concerns, I'm talking quantity distance. How close can you put these facilities to a rocket that has hypergolic fuels on it? And how can you mitigate that blast exposure if you are inside the QD? And how do you get safety waivers for those things? So we're coming up with innovative ways to mitigate the blast exposure. We build multi-use facilities where they may swing between a government and a commercial or a civil use. So, and then the other challenge, of course, is if we're in a military installation, we need to be cyber secure. So we need to make sure our engineers are way up to code, up to speed on all the cybersecurity standards. So there's a lot there, not to mention location. We're running out of land, right? Now, Vandenberg, we were just out of Vandenberg and driving down on the South Base. There's a lot of land at Vandenberg. Um, and I think that's going to open up. Of course, the challenge of Annenberg is what? Santa Barbara County is pretty restrictive when it comes to environmental issues. So we've got to work through that. Now, if we're working on previously disturbed dirt areas, somewhere where a building already was, it makes it a lot easier, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Now let's talk policy and state infrastructure or need, because every state, if you go, I suspect if you or your team go talk to various states, they'd be pretty excited to put infrastructure in their state. Texas, a perfect
Jobs,
example.
right?
Yeah,
Jobs. Yeah.
that's exactly right. So what I'm hearing here at the association is more and more governors are trying to figure out how to get into the space economy. And so, from your perspective, one, is policy an issue? obviously, or what are the policy issues that you're having to battle? And then two, if we get it right, let's just presume for a moment that we get policy right. What does the future look like?
Yeah, policy is always going to be an issue, right? And I think more of an issue is what kind of incentives are the states willing to give to these commercial providers to come in and build these very expensive facilities in their state. And that matters to these commercial providers, right? If the state can kick in money to help them or whatever, some kind of financial incentives. If we get, if the policy, if all these policy issues get sorted out, I think you're going to see all 50 states chasing this space work because space is the place. And I don't know who
Yeah,
said that, Lance Lord, a long time ago. Or if you're not in space, you're not in the race. All that, that's all true.
right.
And it's really coming to fruition right now. Space is the next great place. It's the next great undeveloped domain. Everything that we have terrestrial, everything's a stretch. A lot of the things that we have terrestrial are going to transition to space and we're going to start building that infrastructure of space. We have to. If we want to get to Mars, we need that launching point from. So everything we're doing terrestrial is going to go to space eventually. Everyone wants a piece of that because it's so expensive and so lucrative. It's the future. It's absolute. The ocean used to be that way, now or the seas, right? And now we're going to space. So I'm
Yes, sir.
excited about the future for sure.
Yeah, I've heard, we haven't seen a new space strategy come out in this new administration yet, but I suspect it's going to have something to the fact that we need factories on the moon and cities on Mars in the future. And it's going to take a lot to get there. You can't, I mean, you can say whatever you want, obviously, in speeches, but the reality is when you say that, there's a huge infrastructure logistics chain that comes along behind it, to include policy, that says because space is exciting and it is the future, we need to do things infrastructurally to support it and protect it. And so BRPH is right in the middle of that, figuring out that future infrastructure that we know we need, which goes
But
back.
so isn't the SFA, Hep. Let's not sell that short. Your organization is front and center on that, advocating for space, advocating for the warfighter, and not to get out in front of your headlights too much here, but things like that space power conference you have in Orlando, I think it's like 9th through the 14th, the dates are probably wrong, of December. That's exactly the forum where we can articulate this vision.
Really appreciate all the support that you've provided to that. But you're right, it is a platform. SFA is a platform, and that
Yep.
conference is a great place to get everyone together to have these exact discussions, slap the table after having the discussion, and then reporting out and helping our policymakers better understand it. Because we still have yet to have a Space Force veteran or a legacy guardian be elected into office.
Yeah,
And until we
that's
have that
coming. Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
it's going to be difficult to try to keep educating policymakers on how critical it is.
Yeah, but to that point, space is a difficult domain to
Mhm.
understand, right?
Yes, sir.
And orbital mechanics is not intuitive. It's not intuitive.
Right.
So you're trying to explain to our legislators, our educators, space, and it's not their fault. They just don't get it. It's not like you can see a airplane streaking across the sky when you're talking about space. Yeah, trust me, they're up there, right?
That's
And
right.
trust me, it's 22,500 miles of surface of the earth. And you start explaining all that stuff, and their eyes just roll back in their head, and it's not their fault. I wish we could send everyone to weapons school, right? I wish we could educate everyone to the level that you went through weapons school. You talk about they have to have that level of knowledge to enable them to enact policies and talk intelligently at these forums. It's not a pickup, can't be just a pickup game. It has to be enduring and lasting and ingrained, and we're just not there yet.
Yes, sir. You've had experience on both sides, military leadership and now private industry. What do you think are the key ingredients to successful collaboration between the Department of War, Space Force,
Good for
and
you.
private sector partners like
Yeah,
BRPH?
yeah. Some things don't change. It's early, often transparent communications. And we just talked about this space power conference. That's where you have these transparent and conversations. You have to know what's going on and you have to build that trust. And the good thing about that space power conference is a lot of uniforms there, right? It's not just industry, it's primarily uniforms and not just the seniors, right? You've got the captains, lieutenants, the specialists there too, who have great ideas. So I'll get off that bandwagon. That really is a great venue for exactly what you're talking about. What we try to do is when we're developing these relationships, we don't treat them like one-off projects. We want the client to know that we're your partners, not only for this, but for the life or wherever you want to go. Um, we talked about flexible contracting vehicles. That's important. Um, yeah, I just think that it's all about communications early, often, and building that trust and collaboration. And you have to get out there. You have to do this stuff. You have to go to conferences. You have to be on panels. You have to do white papers, and it's all that stuff contributes to it.
You're right. And so just for our audience's sake, can you just provide an overview of where BRPH is located across the US?
Yeah. So we're not a very big company, Hip. I'm gonna get this number wrong, but 400 people maybe, um, give or take. Our headquarters is in Melbourne, Florida. That's where I am right now, although I live in Colorado. We have offices in Orlando, Florida, in addition to the one in Melbourne, Florida. We have offices in Atlanta. We have offices in Huntsville. We're in Seattle. We are in Denver. We're in Arizona. We're in California. So I missed a couple, but we're all over the United States, looking at Houston. So um, not a big company, but we're widely dispersed because you need to hang a shingle where your clients are. If you
Yeah.
say, "Hey, we're competing for work in pick a state," well, do you have a presence there? Well, we really don't, but we were willing to travel. That really doesn't fly, right? So we try to go where the clients are and provide really good, exceptional service to them.
Well, now I'd like to pivot to war story time
Okay.
with General Buck because, sir, we've been on a couple of deployments, quote unquote. You've been on, in fact, you broke the mold when that whole Director of Space Force thing happened. And so I'd like to just, get on document that dialogue and talk a little bit about how the Space Force is where it is. And we can start with the simple question. How many times have you been asked, what do you think about U.S. Space Force headquarters moving to Alabama?
Oh, well, that was a political football, wasn't it? Yeah, I'm pretty ambivalent, really.
Hmm.
I live in Colorado, and I know that it was going to, first was in Alabama, then it got moved to Colorado Springs, and now it's back to Alabama. Um, I really don't care as long as we have a place where we can hang a shingle, right? And
That's
let's
right.
get going on it.
Yeah.
And so I think a decision's been made. I think we're going to execute on that. But I'm pretty pleased with, and you have to be too, Hip, with the progress the Space Force has made. And if you look at what the Space Force has done, what they've done really is we've pivoted from a service that was always, or a domain that was always looked at as being a supporting domain, to one that now could be supported, right?
Hmm.
And we're seeing that in some of the war games I support, right? How it's a swinging gate. Sometimes the space domain is Space Force is supporting, sometimes we're supported. And that's a big deal now. The other thing I think that has happened since the Space Force stood up is we've recognized the importance of our commercial partners.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if we fully embraced the concept yet, but no joke, they are the 500-pound gorilla in space now. They have so many assets, so much capability, so much SDA. And we are just now beginning to peel that back and what they really can bring to the fight. So that leveraging those commercial capabilities, that's another thing that I feel like the Space Force has done. And then the other piece is, speaking of standing up a headquarters, we now understand it's important to the joint fight, and I think the joint community recognize that as well. Not to mention the allied integrations into the space power fight. So a lot of piece parts there that we can dive into, but the headquarters moving there, the Space Force standing up. I see this evolution. In 2017, I could hardly say space is a warfighting domain, and now we just say it freely, right?
That's right. Yeah, back in the day when you and I went to Shreveport War Game, I don't remember. I think that was 2017.
Boy, I got myself in a little bit of pickle there, didn't I? Because I went really hard, really fast, right? I said, "Hey, got to take the initiative. I'm going to take out those. I'm going to take those out." Yeah, bro. We won the fight, but man, everyone was like, "Hey, you can't do that."
Do you remember who was playing the executive team during that
I
war
don't.
game?
Who was it?
It was Mark, who has now just been confirmed as the
Yeah.
Undersecretary of Defense for Space
Yeah,
Policy.
yeah. Good. Yeah. So, yeah, I was getting out in front of my headlights a little bit, but I have been through so many of those Shriever war games where we just get our butts handed to us because we wait for red
Right.
to make the first move and then we're done,
Right.
right? So I'm like, okay, well, this is a war game. It's a safe environment. Let me experiment a little bit. And boy, we went hard and fast, and
It was
people
great.
were shocked, right?
Yeah, I
But it
thought it
was
was
pretty
awesome.
effective. Yeah,
I thought it was great. In fact, during Lieutenant General Gagnon just got promoted and
right.
just took over Combat Forces Command. And during
Good for
his,
you for getting the naming convention right, by the way.
sir, we're the Space Force Association. It's our job to know. But he said the word in his speech. He talked about attack. We need to be defensive and when necessary, attack. And
Yeah,
again, back to your point that you just made, I think there's still this belief that space is a benign environment. And we've got this capability knowledge gap that exists in this generation where they've never known, this next generation, they've never known a day without space. And they don't know what would happen to their livelihoods if they didn't have Space Force around to ensure freedom of action in the domain and providing those capabilities. So it's interesting. And I think you're going to see some policy changes happening
yeah.
because we do have to take this a lot more seriously than we have. I wouldn't say we didn't take it seriously in the past, but we got to pay a lot more attention to the nuance that you just described.
How when we were still in uniform, yeah, I don't know. I retired in 2018. I don't know, and you retired around that time
Yeah.
frame.
Yeah.
Um, we've been talking for 20 years about classifying stuff at the right level, right? And we still aren't there. And that's an enabler when you can start talking freely about stuff. It really handcuffs us when we don't classify things at the correct level. And we still have that warp, I think, that we're carrying with us.
I think you're right. And the ironic thing is, I think some of the things that we're classifying or classifying at the high level, it's known to other countries already because the capability exists in their portfolio. And
Yeah.
so you're right. We got to think about, hey, is this really classified? Because if I look up in the sky with a high-powered telescope, I can see technology. So who are we exactly hiding from? So I know this administration's thinking about that. I know our senior leaders in the Space Force are examining that because you're right. If the only people that we're protecting information from is ourselves, then probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah, and we're hurting, we got to educate our legislators, our educate all those people, and we're
Right.
hurting ourselves. Can we go back to the Shriever War Games and a little
Yeah.
bit and talk about how that has evolved over time and what we're doing
Yeah.
right in that environment? I tell you, I'm still involved in that. I'm the old guy in the back of the room now that says, "Hey, have you thought about when I was back and when I was in uniform?" That's what I'm doing now. I
Right.
hope I'm adding value. But I tell you, it's become such a great war game environment because we have all these different allied partners coming in, and I don't know if I can say the exact number, but we have a lot of partners coming in and to participate with us in the fight. And they are learning so much from us, and we're learning from them too, right? And then we have the commercial partners coming in, and my goodness, you talk about leveraging commercial capabilities in that environment. It's huge. We have a ways to go on modeling and simulation because the domain is such a hard environment to model just because of the nature of it. But the progress we've made in Schriever War Games for me is astounding from when I last participated in 2017 as a player to now where I'm a senior advisor sitting back there and watching the evolution of this war game.
Yes, sir. So you bring up the point about commercial and allies. So this, I always talk about it in terms of, or the discussions I'm having about triple use technology. And
Sure.
triple use is just, we talk about dual use all the time, meaning commercial and national security. The fact is, we're going to see it in civil as well, especially in space, where you've got NASA's using the tech, you've got commercial is selling the tech, you've got Space Force using the tech for national security, and then you got companies like yours that are providing that critical infrastructure and technology. So, yeah, this, unlike any other domain, is you're going to see a lot more of that usage and that policy. I think that should continue to evolve than any other domain. You don't see private sector buying aircraft carriers or selling aircraft carriers to the private sector. It's so in the space domain, you're going to see bandwidth being sold, you're going to see spaceports being sold and built, you're going to see satellites being sold and built, and it's going to be used for multiple uh, uh, um, aspects of the space domain.
Yeah, you're already seeing that, like a craft-like application for some of our commercial spacecraft now,
Yeah.
where we're saying, hey, if we go to conflict, we're going to buy this much bandwidth from you and stuff like that. That's just the tip of the iceberg, though, I tell you. You're right. The commercial is going to take off, and you're right, the civil is going to take off. Space domain or the Space Development Agency, wow, the tranches, their satellites they're putting up there, they're all participating in Schriever War Games, and it's crazy. The hardest part, of course, is educating our allies about all these capabilities and all these agencies, because they don't know. Hell, we don't even know some of it, right? So,
Right. If I took a quiz and I asked you to answer questions about the various deltas we have, let alone
oh
the
my
field
God,
commands,
it's
you
hard
probably
for me
couldn't
to
answer them.
keep up on a hip, right? I mean,
Right.
we've got field commands, and now one of them went from Spock to Combat Forces Command. So, okay, that guy's to keep up with that. We've got mission deltas and we got system deltas, right?
That's
And you
right.
got to stay up with all that growth and all that changing. And then you got squadrons, which you and I can relate to squadrons. And then, are you going to have a futures command? Or are you not going to have a futures command? What does that look like? All these things. And I tell you, you got to keep up with that stuff. And that's incumbent upon industry to
Hmm.
keep up with that. Otherwise, we can't have the conversations with Space Force because we're talking apples and oranges here. So, yeah, you're right. There's so much movement right now, and it's hard for me to keep up with it, to be honest with you.
Well, sir, now going back to the ally discussion, because I remember going to the UK with you. There was a space ally.
Careful now, if this is being recorded, right?
Right, absolutely. But no, we're sitting around the table. You're there. The Honorable Steve Katay is at the head of the
Mhm.
table.
I love
And
Steve Cattell.
great leader and now CEO over there at True Anomaly.
Yep.
But remember the allies, what they're looking for, and kind of reflecting back on that moment. If you could remember, and they were looking for, hey, the way I heard it is, we have limited resources in our defense budget, and we want to help in space. So basically, they're saying, how can we help? So now, kind of reflecting back on that moment in time based on your experience here with Schriever, what are you learning now from how the allies are contributing to space power?
So, location, location, location.
Hmm.
Location matters, especially when you're dealing with certain adversaries.
Yeah.
And without saying too much, it's really important to have partners who are positioned strategically around the world, and we could take advantage of their locations. Now, a lot of these countries have, so we're playing. Trying to think how much I can say here, Hip.
Yeah, that's okay, sir. And if we don't, really, they're probably getting clarity. I guess the real discussion is they're probably getting better clarity than they had back in 2015 when they were
Well,
just
not only better clarity, but they're actually bringing real capes to the
right,
tip,
right.
which is pretty cool.
That's way cool. And
Yeah.
probably test or using Shriver War Game as a test bed to
Uh,
determine what they should invest in, what they should divest in, how they should partner with their corporate partners in their respective countries, and then what companies are coming to the US because they know they want to partner with the Department of War.
yep. Yep. Yeah, it's just exciting, exciting times. Well, I'm
Yes, sir.
fortunate to be involved with that, by the way.
Yeah, what a great, I mean, it's still probably the best war game, I think, and we're working with some corporate partners and love to have this discussion with you offline. How do we scale this such that we can have tabletop exercises at the unclassified level to better educate folks about the infrastructure and why space is so critical? Starting all the way in junior high and high school, getting those
Yep.
kids interested and learning more about the space domain, and then in college with our Space Professional Society, helping these kids lead this dialogue and this discussion with guardians and leaders like you and folks within your company being mentors to that process. So,
Yeah. It's all about educating and be able to talk intelligently about space, and we're just not there yet as a nation.
sir, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk with me at SFA, talk about all the cool things you're working on. Any closing comments for you about kind of where BRPH is, where BRPH is going, and then when folks want to learn more about BRPH, where do they go?
Yeah, so if you go to any major launch site, I don't know, the Cape, you go to KSC, you go to Vandenberg, you go to Wallops, you go to Alaska, Mojave, and you look at a piece of launch or launch related infrastructure, you'd be hard pressed to find one that doesn't have BRPH's fingerprints on it. We are renowned as the experts in that field. Our mantra is creative solutions precisely delivered, and that's exactly what we do. And we're well respected in this industry, and that's kind of why I'm here, is because I like to join a winning team. But if you want to find out more about BRPH, you can check out our website. You can come to conferences. We're at all the major conferences, including that one next month. Stop by, chat, reach out, call me, or just send me a line, dbuck@brph.com. Hip, I like to say this. Everything that I know about leadership, I learned from you. We had some fun, didn't we?
Sir, I know that's not true. The one lesson I do remember talking to you about is the precious resource of time. And that's the one that we still come back to about, hey, we've only got so much time on
Oh
this
my
planet.
goodness. Yeah.
Let's use it wisely and have a good time while we're
Well,
here.
you did four quadrants for me one day. You sat down and said, "Here's where you are.
Yeah.
How do you want to spend the rest of your other quadrant that you have left?" And that really resonated with me. It's really important.
And everyone I talk to now, when I emphasize important, they know where that comes from. And I think the entire space community knows it.
Yeah, I hope I do it here.
I
And
bet
now
you
the
do.
team emphasizes they don't even know they're doing it. They don't even know they're doing it, but they're just saying that is important. And I just laughed to myself.
General Buck, another great interview, sir. Thanks for doing everything you're doing, not just at BRPH, but all the extracurricular activity that you're doing for the space community with the war game and advising. And thanks for your leadership in the community.
Always a pleasure, Hip. Great talking to you. Great seeing you.
Great seeing you, sir. We'll talk to you soon.